So the big question for us is, what do we do about it? That's, I think we'll agree, a high cost to pay. How do we handle this, and how can we get Iran to stop enriching uranium? Unfortunately, my answer is that it's become really unlikely that we can stop it diplomatically. A few years ago, we could have reached a grand bargain with the Iran that existed before. And there are indications that in 2003, for example, shortly after the Iraq War, Iran did reach out to us through a secret fax offering a grand bargain, which the Bush administration rejected. There are indications that we could have had a deal. But now you have something happening in Iran, a power struggle that makes it more difficult than ever before to reach an agreement. And I'm talking about, of course, the neoconservatives of Iran, embodied, obviously, in the power of the Revolutionary Guard. So I'll speak a little bit about that. And this is what has made Secretary of State Clinton recently say that Iran is moving toward the status of a military dictatorship. I mean, those are strong words, and Iran is definitely not any place near the efficiency of a military dictatorship. It's still a very divided government, a divided state, but it certainly is moving in that direction. And there are indications that the supreme leader of Iran, who's constitutionally supposed to be the most powerful, is no longer as much in control as we used to think, which makes it difficult, again, to strike a deal. Now, how did this happen? The Islamic Republic of Iran, as it was fashioned in 1979, was really custom-made for Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini. It was custom-made for a leader like him who had the charisma, the religious credibility, high-ranking Shia cleric, revered throughout the Shiite world. And he was a masterful political mind. What he was able to do is he said, look, as Shia political figures, we have always been in the opposition. That's how we get our credibility. That's how we get our following. So he was able to keep sort of an arm's length distance between himself and the taint of everyday political life. So you had the elected officials, like the president and the parliament, who sort of suffered all the consequences of politics, but he was always there as an arbiter to make the final decision. And people always deferred to him because he was Khomeini, because he was the guy. He was the go-to person, and everybody respected that. The problem with strong leaders is they are often followed in history by really weak leaders. And the supreme leader we have today, Ali Khamenei, it's unfortunate for us in the West that their names sound so similar, but Khamenei is nothing like him. He never had the religious credentials. They had to kind of fudge things to make him supreme leader. He was a political hack, essentially. He doesn't have the charismatic authority, and the post was basically handed to him. What you have in a system that is not a dictatorship, that is meant to be for a Khomeini-type system, is that you create a vacuum of power when you have a weak leader like that in such a weak office. So there were two options that could happen to fill that vacuum. You could have a strong reform movement, or you could have something else, something more conservative, more militant. Now, for a while, it looked like the reformists had a shot at filling this power vacuum left by the weakened supreme leader. Khomeini died in '89, and that was when the presidency of Rafsanjani took off, who is now an Ayatollah, a very influential man, richest man in Iran. Rafsanjani started to liberalize things a little bit economically. He started to privatize a lot. He made himself a fortune. People thought, okay, Rafsanjani wants to bring the revolutionary rhetoric down a little bit. He wants to be more pragmatic. He was followed by President Khatami, who was a reformist who coined the term dialogue among civilizations. So he wanted engagement. He ran on a platform of engagement with the West, and he won handily. And that's the sort of the image that we were getting in the United States. We were getting a President Khatami expressing regret over the hostage crisis that started in '79. And an Iranian elected president saying he regrets that the feelings of the great American people are hurt. That's a big deal. Unfortunately, there was something parallel happening at the same time. You had factions, conservative factions, young people, non-clerics, young non-clerics, many of whom had fought in the Iran-Iraq War, a bloody war that left arguably a million people dead on both sides. And they were not happy with these reforms. They were not happy with the permissiveness of somebody like Khatami, and they were not happy with the kind of corruption associated, the economic corruption associated with Rafsanjani. And so they sought to challenge from the ground up a grassroots movement to challenge the old guard conservatives, the old guard of the regime. And so these neoconservatives, who affiliate themselves with a party such as the Abadan party that had helped launch Ahmadinejad's election in 2005 as president, their basic thing was going back to the values of the revolution and stop the corruption. One of the vehicles they used was the Revolutionary Guard. They rose up the ranks. And the Revolutionary Guard, I should say, is a Praetorian entity, essentially. As we know from ancient Rome, you had the Praetorian Guard that guarded the Caesar. And eventually the Praetorian Guards got stronger than the Caesar did and could make or break the Roman Emperor. It's happened in many places throughout history. It's the sort of this sense that when you give people guns and you put them very close to power, they're likely able to abuse it. And this is exactly or very similar to what's happening in Iran today. And this is the trend that Hillary Clinton was talking about. And in 2005, the conservatives of Iran, the old guard, they had a candidate, Mohammed Bakr Kalibaf. He was from the Revolutionary Guard. He was a commander, an Air Force commander. He said, oh, we want to elect this guy. This is going to be the next president. Out of nowhere comes Ahmadinejad, supported by the ground troops, the shock troops of the Revolutionary Guard, the Basij militia that we've heard about. The Basij militia are responsible for Homeland Security, and they're the ones who beat up the protesters that you see on YouTube and on CNN. And those are the people who helped Ahmadinejad get elected in 2005. There was a lot of irregularities, but there were also a lot of campaigning going on. Ahmadinejad, of course, has given a lot back to the Revolutionary Guard, because the Revolutionary Guard is not unlike the People's Liberation Army in China. They have massive economic power. They own a lot of companies. And Ahmadinejad has given them contracts worth in the billions. And in 2006 alone, the dollar equivalent of the contracts that Ahmadinejad gave to the Revolutionary Guard equaled 3% of Iran's real GDP that year. Just massive amounts of money that was just being handed over to this organization that, by the way, had the best guns already and had the best, were in control of the foreign operations and Homeland Security, et cetera. So here we are. And on February 11th, after protests over the legitimacy of the re-election of Ahmadinejad, which came out of nowhere, which some districts got more than 100% of the vote in, and you had the Interior Ministry claiming it just a few hours after the polls closed that Ahmadinejad has won. It was basically a coup, and that's what people are calling it. It's a coup not against the reformists, but against the supreme leader himself, whose whole legitimacy rested on the system of the Islamic Republic, on a system that pretended to be fair and that allowed people to voice their opinion through votes. And people were participating in percentages that would put our own sort of electorate to shame. Even though they knew that there was something that stunk about the system, they still participated. And that was pushed by the wayside by this faction that essentially put Ahmadinejad in power there against the wishes of everybody else. It was a charade.